this match at our nationals and going forward. And also, I would ask you, if you've got a friend that's maybe put a rifle away or been frustrated not shooting or gone to a different shooting discipline, pay it forward. Share with them with maybe a couple things you might learn tonight. And it's my goal to have all you guys walk away with maybe something that, you know, opens your mind, maybe a new skill that you pick up. I've really been, you know, blessed by God. I've been shooting for 11 years, and it was always my goal to get in the Hall of Fame, and I was fortunate enough last year to do that. And again, my motives and intentions are sincere, honorable. I just want to help everybody. There are a lot of people, some in this room, that are much more skilled than I am. I just want to do my part. I know it sounds, you know, a little bit of a cliche, but I just want to give something back. And thank you, Harlan. What I want to do today is first talk a little bit about, you know, really getting your rifle to shoot to its potential. And we've got some chairs. Okay. Maybe not. Guys, it frustrates me a lot of times. I shoot locally at Chippewa Rifle Range or at Kelby, get a lot of Benchrest shooters and try to help people out. Their gun's not shooting. Really, your Lapua case is really where everything starts and how you prepare that. And a lot of people get on the internet today and try to get information and glean things that will help them set up their rifle to shoot to its potential. Regrettably, there's not always good, you know, sound information from the internet. A couple things on the preparation of the brass is your neck turning. When I first started shooting in '99, a Hall of Fame shooter, Bill Forrester, told me, cut thin to win. And I go, what does that mean, Bill? He goes, cut your next to your brass thin to win. I'm like, okay. He goes, what net are you shooting? I said, well, I use a 262 net. He goes, what do you turn your brass to? And I said, well, 8.5 like everyone else. He says, you can use that, and that's fine as long as your reamer manufacturer hit 262 exactly on the reamer. He said, but if you really want your gun to shoot better, I would recommend you turn your cases 8.1 to 8.3. I went, Bill, that's a lot of, you know, clearance on the net. And Bill said, try some cases where you make them up at 8.5 and at 8.1, go out on an honest day at 200, and then you call me and tell me what shoots better. Well, we had a match, going back to the time machine, in April of 2002 at a range we shot in Cincinnati, Fairfield Gun Club. And I had a Krieger barrel at the time. I shot a 16-32 AG at 100 yards. And I thought, oh, I'm going to save this for the super shoot in a couple months. So here comes super shoot, and I take my good gun with a Krieger barrel, and I made up some new brass. And I go and I'm practicing, and at 100 yards, I can't shoot smaller than a 250. And I'm like, this gun was on fire a month ago. What's happened? So, shot 100 yards, used a different barrel, did well the first 2 days, and getting ready for 200 yards, I wanted to practice. So I didn't want to take my new brass out that I just turned. I'll use the brass I used at Cincinnati that I shot the 16 AG with. And at 200 yards, Smiley Hensley and a couple other people watched, the gun was on fire. I was shooting smaller groups, literally, groups, small twos, and some big 5-shot groups. This gun was just a laser. And I was really perplexed. My new brass didn't shoot as good as this practice brass. And a friend of mine, Charlie D'Alessandro, who just recently passed away, I don't know if some of you guys know Charlie's, from Orville, and he came up to me and said, what's the problem? I said, Charlie, the new brass I made for my gun, I cannot get it to shoot like the old brass. And Charlie was a retired machinist, and he took his tube mic and started looking at my new brass. He goes, what do you think these were turned to? I said, well, I was trying to turn them to like 8.1. He says, well, did you loan your neck turner to someone? And he's loaning my pumpkins out to someone. I'm like, yeah, I probably did. He says, this brass is 8.6. I said, oh, okay. And he grabbed the practice brass, and he goes, these are 8.9. practice brass at the super shoot the last 2 days, and I did real well that year. I got home, and Sunday morning my wife said, "What are you going to do today?" And I'm like, "Do I have an opportunity?" She goes, "I'm going to take the kids to the zoo." I said, "Look, I know you're going to think I'm crazy. I've been gone for 10 days, but I need to go back down to Kelby's, and I've got to try something that's driving me crazy." She's like, "You're going back to Kelby's to practice?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I live in Cleveland. I drive an hour south to Kelby's. I'm setting up all my stuff. And George goes, "What are you doing? The super shoot was just done." I said, "George, I got to get this done. I got to try something. It's bugging me." So I made up a number of cases that I had loaded up, practice brass and regular. And I had a friend of mine blindly give me the loads to shoot. And I would give each one my best effort. And every time I shot the 8.1 practice brass from Cincinnati, the gun would just shoot down. And every time I was handed the brass that was new, was 8.6, the gun would just kind of shoot a little stupid, big 4 or 5. So there is a difference. And if you guys have time, forget about the thou clearance or half thou total clearance. Try to have your loaded round to have 2/1000ths or more clearance. Currently today, I'm shooting a 263 neck. I'm shooting a bow tail bullet. My loaded round at the neck is 260.2. So having more clearance is not a bad thing. It's going to help you. And I've seen and fixed a lot of guns that just didn't shoot their potential just by getting people to make up new brass that was a little bit thinner. So it is real important to have clearance to where the gun consistently can release that bullet without any type of hindrance. So that's really important. I'm sorry?
Respect.
Yeah, it really does make a difference. Yes.
2,000 total or 2,000?
2,000 total. Okay? Now, I'm not putting anybody's machining skills or measuring skills down, but Charlie told me, he said, "Look, all honesty, unless you're using a ball mic every day at work or have a very good feel for it, using a ball mic to set your neck thickness, you're probably making your brass 2 to 4 thousandths too thick. Ultimately, when you're all done, the only important measurement, gang, is taking a micrometer and measuring it at the pressure ring in the neck. That is the litmus test right there. And that should, I'm sorry? After the bullet seating. You want to measure it on the pressure ring wherever your bullet is seated. And for safety, you should always be doing that when you're making up new brass. And again, if you can have 2/1000ths of clearance versus a half thou or even a thou, you're going to find that the gun consistently will shoot better at. A couple things I've learned along the way too in prepping my brass and maintaining it. A while ago I thought, I'm not going to clean the primer pockets. That's overrated. It's not needed. And for a couple of years, I couldn't shoot a T-mag at 100 yards, and that really wasn't too hard for me before. And I'm like, I'm just not getting good barrels. I'm just not seeing it. I'm just not shooting well. And last year at the East-West match in St. Louis, I was seating my primers, and on loaded rounds, I'd feel some that were a little bit recessed, and some were flat. And it was like, this epiphany. I'm going, gee, I wonder if that's a bad thing, which I just answered my own question. So I started just taking the Sinclair primer pocket, square reamer, and making sure all my primer pockets were uniform. And I could feel each one was recessed when I did properly seat the primer. And I went out, shot an 18-12 ag, which I hadn't shot at 100 yards in a couple of years. So it definitely makes a difference to have your primer pockets all square in the same depth. Your ignition is so important in this game, just like in rimfire, it's everything. And any inconsistency will show up on your target. The other thing I want to talk about is your trimming of the brass. Dave Bruno does all my gunsmithing, and we shared a reamer for a long time. The first reamer we had was a Hendrickson 1510 reamer. And Dave and I would go to the match, and if we were focusing and concentrating, we would trim our brass every day, and the guns would shoot. When we got a little bit lackadaisical about our breast prep, we would start having groups that just kind of got ugly. And I go, oh, geez, start measuring the brass. My brass would be 1502, 1504, 1498. It varied, but it got within 10 thousandths of the trim length on that reamer. And that's bad juju when you let the brass get within 10 thousandths. So I said, Dave, we're going to solve that. I called up Hugh Hendrickson. I said, Hugh, I want a new reamer made that's 1525, so I never have to worry about trimming my brass. Regardless of how long it gets, it's never going to approach that trim length. Hugh said, no problem. Dave and I got this reamer. It was great. Never took the trimmer. I had an epiphany last April at Chippewa Rifle Range. Chippewa is right near Kelly's. And if you guys have ever shot Chippewa, it's just constantly a mixing bowl. Your flags are never all one color. It's always swirling. We had a rear on a day at 200 yards where you could really see what your loads and what your guns were capable of doing. So I took some brass and I was shooting my gun. I'm shooting 4-shot groups. And at 200 yards, the best I could do were some ugly mid to big 4s. I'm going, you know, I should be able to shoot 2s or small 3s in these conditions with this rifle. Something's not right. I'm going to make the brass everything it can be. I made sure the primer pockets were all squared, the depth was uniform, and I then took my trimmer. I'm going to trim this brass to 1490. And I trimmed 4 cases, go up the line, honest condition from 9 o'clock, shoot a mid-1 in the middle of the mothball. And I'm like, that's just too coincidental. Took another 4 cases, measured them. They measured 1492, 1496, 1498, just 5 or 6 thousandths variance. Trimmed those, went and shot another small 2. I'm like, okay, I'm onto something here. Took other brass that varied, didn't trim it, and it would shoot mid-4s, small 4s, just ugly groups. I trimmed that brass, and the gun just, every time I trimmed it, the gun would respond, and it would really stick it. I was with some of my friends, and I'm like, all right, you know, let's do a blind test. Here's what I'm seeing. You guys load me up some rounds of some of the brass that's not trimmed, and some that is trimmed, and I'll give you an honest effort. And every time, the trim brass really shot. So my point is, do the work on the brass. It's really important. Again, we talked about the primer pocket, squaring it, make it the depth uniform, trimming your cases. Even though you think 2 or 3 thousandths doesn't matter, that consistent release of that bullet